Oh man, don't you just feel good watching that clip? Like every time I watch that, it just brings like this big smile to my face and see them working together and we're falling with style. Like I love that line. This summer, by the way, my name's Andrew if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, but this summer I introduced my kids to the first three Toy Story movies. So it's like a brand new world for them and they are like fully addicted to these movies. They're asking for them every day and it's been a while since I'd seen them. And so I'd forgotten how great that friendship is between Woody and Buzz. And if you haven't seen it in a long time, or maybe you've actually never seen the Toy Story movie, Woody is like the little boy you saw there at the end, this kid by the name of Andy. Woody is Andy's favorite toy. And then one year for his birthday, he gets Buzz Lightyear, who's like the new cool toy. And so Woody responds with like a whole lot of jealousy, and they're like rivals for a whole long time. But then about halfway through the movie, Buzz gets like kind of kidnapped by a kid by the name of Sid. You guys remember Sid in the movie? He's like that crazy kid that we all had on our block growing up who like blows everything up and is like, parents don't want us to play with him. Well, Buzz ends up with Sid, and he's going to blow Buzz up. And so who jumps in to save the day? But Woody. Woody saves Buzz, and that's what leads to that scene where you see there at the end. You fast forward to Toy Story 2, and then this time Woody gets kidnapped. He ends up in this bad place, and what does Buzz do? Buzz gathers all the toys together. They come up with a plan. They like march through the neighborhood. They got to go save Woody. And so I'm like watching these movies with my kids, and I just cannot believe, I love it. Like these two guys just become the best of friends, Woody and Buzz. And they're with each other through thick and thin, through good times and bad. And whenever the other one is in trouble, the first one comes in and jumps in and saves the day. I love, love, love their friendship. It's so great. I mean, maybe you haven't seen Toy Story in a long time. Anyone grow up seeing the movie Goonies? Anyone about my age probably? Goonies was real popular. Some of you, I can tell you're too young for Goonies. You're watching Stranger Things right now. It's like the exact same thing. Total ripoff, just in case you're wondering. But all these shows, all these movies, they all have the same basic plot. Here's the plot. Group of friends gets in trouble. They face this insurmountable obstacle. And what happens? These friends, they got to dig deep. They got to band together. They got to sacrifice for each other. And they come out the other side stronger than ever. You see, you and I, we love stories like this. We love stories like this, and I'll tell you why. It's because we all want these kinds of friends. 3 years ago, some of you know this, 3 years ago, I moved here from Chicago, so in the Midwest. And, I had a couple days, about a week before we left, I had a friend offer to make the 30-hour drive out here with me. I mean, he offered, like, no kidding, like, he volunteered without me even asking. Now, I know many of you, you've never been in the Midwest, but once you leave Chicago, this is what it looks like for 30 hours. Here, you're going to see a picture right here. This is it. This is 30 hours. I had a friend volunteer to go with me, to spend 30 hours with me for 2,000 miles in a U-Haul. He had to take time off work. He had to fly a budget airline back. He gave up sleep, time with his family to sit in this truck with me. Why? I don't know. I don't know why he did it. But I'll tell you, I sure am glad he did. And I'll never forget it. Proverbs 18:24 says this. It says, the one who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I'll tell you, deep down inside of us, we all want that in our lives. We all want someone who's going to stick close to us. Someone who's going to be like family to us through thick and thin. You get your heart broken by a guy or a girl. What do you want? You want a friend who's going to be there for you. Or you lose a job, and you want someone who's just going to sit with you and tell you how much that stinks and how sad they are for you. Or you get a diagnosis, or you lose someone close to you, and you're going to want someone to grieve with you in that. We all want that friend who's going to be like family to us. Now, here's the good news for you and me. The good news is that we live today in a world where it's easier than ever to stay connected. I mean, if you're my age or older, you probably remember the dark days of technology. You remember this? Like growing up, if you wanted to call someone, you actually had to know their number. Or if you didn't know it, if you didn't have it memorized, you'd have to go to like your family's address book and like flip through it and look for their number. And then you'd have to walk all the way to the one phone you had in your house because, every family only had one phone. You'd have to hope no one else was on it. And you'd have to call your friend. You'd have to hope that by some chance they were home. And if they weren't home, you'd have to hope they had an answering machine and that you'd leave a message on the answering machine, hope they'd get that message, and then they'd call you back, and then you'd have to be home. I mean, I don't know how we ever reached or talked to anyone back then. I don't know how it worked. Today, how great is the world we live in today? Today, you want to get in touch with me? You could call me. You could text me, you could email me, you could Facebook message me, you could follow me on Instagram, and you could see every meal I've eaten for the last 3 years. Isn't that so great? This device has made it so easy to stay connected. Even on Facebook. You know how many friends the average person has on Facebook? Think about it for a second. Actually tell the person next to you how many friends the average person has on Facebook. Just take a guess. Tell the person next to you. I'll give you a few seconds. All right, you ready? The average person on Facebook, get this, the average person has 155 friends on Facebook. How great is that? You can stay connected to people you went to elementary school with. It is so easy in our day to stay connected. But here's what else I know. I also know that you and we are very aware that there is something else going on in our society today. There's something else going on. In fact, the American Sociology Review, they did this extensive research, and they found that the average person today has 2 close friends, which doesn't sound so bad until you realize that 25 years ago, the average person had 6 close friends. Meaning that over the past 25 years, the average person has lost 2/3 of their inner circle. In fact, the same survey, this one breaks my heart. This same survey found that 25% of people that participated in this study, they couldn't name one person they were close to. Not one. In January of last year, some of you probably saw this story. In January of last year, England appointed their first, it's called the Minister of Loneliness. And here's what their job is. This is sad, but this is true. Their job is to tackle what Prime Minister Theresa May called the sad reality of modern life. You think about that for a second. The sad reality of modern life. Research has linked loneliness to things like heart disease, cancer, depression, diabetes, and suicide. You think about that for a second. Our lack of connection and relationships with other people, it is killing us. It is. And I know none of you are probably new to this topic either. And sometimes when we have conversations like this, everyone looks for the easy thing to blame, right? Like it's technology's fault or cell phone's fault or Facebook's fault. And I want you to know today, the issue and the challenge, it is so much more complex than that. Because it seems like everything in our world today, everything is making it harder to maintain meaningful friendships. It's just getting harder. For instance, the average person in America, they move every 3 to 5 years. Real quick, just show of hands. Here and those of you outside, how many of you have moved in the last 3 to 5 years? Just real quick, show of hands. Yeah, a lot of us have. Here's what happens. You move, and a lot of us, we have to start all over again with relationships. I recently came across some research that found that 86% of men and 65% of women who have full-time jobs are putting in over 40 hours a week. Here's what that means. You and I, we just have less free time. There's just less margin in our lives. Even a place like this, even at churches today in our society, the average person comes to church 1.5 times per month. which means it is getting significantly harder for people to show up and even find connections and friendships at church because we're so busy. And we work more hours. We have more going on. And so the end result in our lives is just simply this. Our friendships, our relationships, they just get pushed to the side. Now, growing up, I can remember a different time. I grew up in a town not too different from this. And my block growing up, I'm guessing yours was the same way, we knew every person on our block. We knew their names, we knew their kids, we knew their families. We knew what they did for a living. In fact, I remember a time when I was about 6 or 7, my older brother, got really sick in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m. And he got so sick, my mom needed to take him to the hospital. And without even thinking, my mom called our next door neighbor and said, Andrew needs to spend the night at your house. I got to take his brother to the hospital. And my neighbors said yes without even thinking about it. I mean, that's just what people did. Growing up in my family, some of you know this, I grew up with a single mom, and so money was always tight in our family. And of course, we never talked about that with neighbors, we never said that. But because our neighbors knew us and were connected to us, they realized that. And so what happened is they would take my brother and myself, they'd take us to ball games, or they'd take us to the circus or the fair, because they knew otherwise we wouldn't have an opportunity to go. My mom was a teacher, which meant she had summers off. And so my mom, during the summers, what'd she do? She would watch all the neighborhood kids so all the other parents could be at work. I mean, that's just how things went in our neighborhood. And here's my hunch, is if you and I, if we sat down for coffee, you'd have a very similar story. Things have just changed over the last 20, 30, 40 years in our society. It's just getting more difficult. And so you and I, we watch movies about a toy cowboy and a toy space ranger, and we find ourselves wishing that we had people like that in our lives. And so what do you do? What do you do as an adult? I mean, you can't just walk up to someone and say hey, I'm lonely, want to be my friend? I don't think it works that way. In fact, I'm going to tell you, don't do that. That's not going to go well for you. But what do we do as adults? How do we change the direction of our friendships? I mean, if they're this important, what do we do? And so here's what I want to talk to you about today. Today, I'm going to give you 3 things that you and I can do today. And so here's what I want to ask. I want to ask that you write these down. So in your bulletin, you got a piece of paper, get something to write with. You can put them in your phone, but these are so important to you. I care enough about you to tell you, you need to write these down because we're going to have to take action. You're going to have to do it. And so today I'm going to walk us through 3 things that you and I can do to make a difference in our friendships. And here's the first one. First one is just simply invest time. Just invest time. Now, I know this may sound like a no-brainer to you, but sometimes you and I can forget that real friendships, they take time. In fact, there's a researcher by the name of Robin Dunbar, and Robin has found that to move someone from an acquaintance, think maybe someone you work with, maybe the IT person that you, as at your work, you know their name, maybe you know if they're married or not, but that's about all the information you have. To move someone from an acquaintance to a casual friend. Casual friend is someone you can have a 5-minute conversation with and it doesn't feel horribly awkward. You can say hey, how about the Lakers? Or, hey, did you try that new restaurant down the street? And the conversation goes okay. To move someone from an acquaintance to a casual friend, it takes 50 hours of time. 50 hours of time. Now, if you have a casual friend and you want to move them to a friend, think someone where if you got a flight next week, leaving from John Wayne, if you want to get a ride to the airport and not have to pay for an Uber, if you want to do that kind of movement in your relationship, that will cause 90 hours. Just 90 hours to move someone from a casual friend to a friend. Now, if you want to move a friend to a close friend, the type of friend we're talking about today, the Buzz and Woody kind of friends, the kind of person who's going to be there for you, that takes 200 hours. Takes 200 hours. A while back, I texted one of my friends and asked for a ride to the airport. I had a flight leaving at like 4:30 or 5 on like a Thursday afternoon. And so I just texted him like, hey, can you give me a ride to the airport in a couple days? I got a flight leaving at 4:30 or 5. And about 10 minutes later, the guy texts me back. And he says, sure. And then real quick after that, he sends another text. And he says, which airport, John Wayne or LAX? I like read that. I'll tell you, no joke, I was blown away. I'm like, this flight leaves like at 4:30, meaning you would have to drive through hours of traffic. And you said yes before you even knew what airport I was leaving from. I mean, that was incredible. The good news for him was it was John Wayne, but I was blown away. I'm like, I didn't realize we were such good friends that you would sacrifice an entire day. I'm like, we're close friends, right? You and I, we got to understand this. Friendships, they take time. And so I want to be really clear about this one. If you don't carve out time, the relationships in your life, they're going to die. They're going to just fade away. I mean, Jesus understood this. Jesus, the most important figure in human history, decided to spend a disproportionate amount of time with just a few people. Today, we know them as the disciples. John 3:22 says this. It says, after this, Jesus and his disciples went out to the Judean countryside, where he spent some time with them and baptized. I mean, Jesus understood authentic friendships. They only come when we carve out time. He spent time with them. I mean, it's one of the reasons why around here we do things like small groups. It's to help us carve out time to spend time together. That's why you heard Tim a few minutes ago. He talked about this thing called the marriage refresh. You know, we do this because we want to help marriages, and the content is going to be great, and I'm really looking forward to it. But another reason we do it for married couples and people who are thinking about marriage, the reason we do it is because it helps you get around people. It helps you carve out time and just connect and spend some time with other people, because you and I, we need this in life. And so here's what I want to ask of you today. I want you at some point today before you go to bed, I want you to look at your calendar for the next 7 days, just this upcoming week. And I want you to flip through the days, and I want you to look, where are you investing time in friendships? Where is it? And if you're not, if you don't have 1 minute free to invest in a friendship, I want you to know I'm concerned. Like, I'm worried for you, because this is that important to us. Because great friendships, they take time. They just do. All right, second one, we're going to keep going here. Second thing that you and I can do this week is we can be transparent. You know, we can be honest about who we really are. I mean, anyone here know the most common weaknesses people claim on a job resume or interview? Anyone know those? Why don't you tell the person next to you, again, this is one more chance, tell the person next to you what you think the most common weakness people have in a resume or just job interview. Just take a guess, I'll tell you the answer. I'll give you like 30 seconds to do this here. All right, here they are. These are the top 3. These are in no particular order, but I love all 3 of them. So number 1, the weakness, the greatest weakness, you know, that someone has in an interview is just, I'm a perfectionist. Like, isn't that so terrible? Like, everything in my life I do has to be perfect. It's such a burden and a weakness that everything is perfect all the time. That's my greatest weakness. Another one is, I'm too hard on myself. Like, I am so committed to this level of excellence, of just A+, 100%, that anytime it dips just below, I just get so mad at myself and make sure it never, ever happens again. I'm just too hard on myself. The last one is, I make everyone else too happy. Like, I work too hard at that. Everyone around me, I just work so hard to make sure everyone's happy and having fun and fully engaged. Like, oh, woe is me for just making everyone's life great. I mean, I want to meet these people because if those are your weaknesses, I can't wait to hear your strengths, right? Now, here's the truth about us. All of us, regardless of interviews or resumes, all of us, we want to present a specific image of ourselves, don't we? We want to look as if we've got things put together. We want to look as if we know the right answers. I mean, you never hear people say, my greatest weakness is I'm just lazy. Like, I could just sit on the couch and watch Netflix for hours and hours and hours. You just don't hear it. Or you never hear someone say, my greatest weakness is I am addicted to my phone, and I'm just on Facebook every 5 minutes, and I can't leave my house without it. Otherwise, I have like a panic attack because I don't know where it is. Or you never hear someone say, what my greatest weakness is like I can't hear feedback. Like, I just don't want to hear any of the mistakes I've made. I don't want to hear about any of those things. We don't hear things like that from people. You and I, usually, we share such a small portion of who we actually are with each other. We get asked questions like, hey, how's it going? And what's our response? Great. How's the family? Great. How's the job? Great. Well, congratulations. Everything is great with us, right? I don't know if you remember, there used to be this like real popular saying, it was fake it till you make it. You guys know that one, right? It's like the idea here is like you pretend like you know what you're doing. You pretend like you have all the answers. And then one day in the future, you will have all the answers and you will know what you're doing. Here's what you got to know. That day's never coming. Like that day, you're never going to have it all figured out. And so here's what I want you to know. Today, I give you permission. You can stop faking it. Like, you can stop faking that your kids are doing great when they're not. You can stop faking that your marriage is amazing when it's struggling. You can stop faking that you're killing it in every area of your life. You can just stop. One of my favorite authors, a guy by the name of Craig Groeschel, he says this. He says, we try to impress people with our accomplishments. Man, that's so true. But we connect to people through our weaknesses. I love that. Years ago, I was leading a group of high school guys. And we'd been together for a couple years, and so this group they were pretty close-knit at the time. And one day, one of our guys walked in, and I could just tell as we were sitting around the circle, I could tell he was just down. Like something was on his heart, like he was really struggling. And he was quiet for the first 20, 25 minutes. I mean, he did not say one word. About halfway through, there was like a lull in the conversation, and he just like took this risk, and here's what he said. He just looked around at the guys around the circle, a bunch of 16-year-old guys, and he goes, guys, I gotta admit something to you. Like, I'm just struggling. And he's like, I've never talked about this before, but I want you to know, like, I have this struggle with pornography. And I know all the things about it. Like, I know it's bad. I know it hurts relationships. I know I shouldn't look at it. But he's like, I just gotta tell you, like, I can't stop. And it's killing me. I'm sitting around this circle with like a group of 16-year-olds, and it gets real quiet, real fast around this circle. I mean, it's dead silent for about 5 seconds. There's another guy about, 2 spots away from him. And real quietly, he goes, me too. And then another guy right next to him goes, yeah, me too, man. And then another one, and another one. And all of a sudden, our conversation changes. And we have one of the most authentic and real conversations that small group ever had. And I'll tell you, we came out of that time, and we were closer than ever. And you want to know why? Because one guy showed up that day and decided, I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to just do more than say everything's great in my life. I'm going to be honest what I'm struggling with here. I'm going to share what's going on in my life. Galatians 6:4 says this. It says, bear one another's burden. One of the things you and I can do is we can be there for someone when they're carrying something significant in their life. We can be there for an unexpected challenge or struggle. I don't know, maybe for you today, maybe you're hearing this and you're thinking, there's someone in my life I just got to come clean with. Like I know someone who's put in the time, like we're close friends, but there is this piece I've been holding back. Maybe today is the day you got to say, I don't want to carry this anymore on my own. Maybe today's the day you got to take a risk and just simply be transparent. You can do that today. All right, one more for you, if you're still taking notes. One more, last one, is you can speak the truth. Proverbs 27:6 is one of my favorite verses. It says this. It says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. Man, I love that. Means a real friend's going to tell you the truth. Real friend's going to tell you the truth even if you don't want to hear it. There's a famous story in the Bible about a king by the name of David. And he was wealthy, this military leader, religious leader. Everyone looked up to David. One day, David sees a woman by the name of Bathsheba. And he instantly falls for her. Now, the problem is Bathsheba's married. Well, it doesn't stop David. David still sleeps with her, ends up getting her husband killed. And then after her husband's dead, has Bathsheba move into the palace and marries her. Now, you got to understand, David's a king, so in this palace, hundreds, if not thousands of people work and live. So he is surrounded by people, and they know exactly what this king has done. They know he slept with this married woman and had her husband killed. They all know this. They're all aware. But David's the king. And so when the king does something like this, you know what you do? You shut your mouth and you go about doing your work, because no one wants to cross the king. And no one does. Until one day, a guy by the name of Nathan shows up. Nathan and David, they've known each other for a while. And so Nathan comes in, starts having a conversation with David, and asks for David's advice. He says, here's the situation, David. Out in the country, there was this really wealthy guy, like super wealthy. This guy has everything he ever wanted. But one day he comes across a poor guy. This poor guy owns one thing of value. He says, David, you want to know what that rich guy did? He took from the poor guy the one thing he treasured, and he kept it as his own. And then Nathan asked the king, he says, King David, what should be done to the rich man? Well, David's like hearing this, he gets all mad, he's frustrated. He's like, punish him. That guy's got to pay for what he's done. At which point, 2 Samuel 12:7, we see Nathan's response. It says, then Nathan said to David, you are the man. You're the guy, David. You took something that wasn't yours and you tried to cover it up. You are the one. See, turns out of all the people in David's life, the hundreds, if not thousands of people that were around him, there was only one person who had the courage to speak the truth to him. Just one. You got that person in your life? You got that person that's going to tell you the truth? Tell you the things you don't want to hear? About a week ago, I was on the phone talking to one of my friends. And I was just processing the situation I was in. It was nothing big. And I was telling him about how I had responded up to this point and how I was planning on responding moving forward. And then I just decided, I don't know why I did this. I just decided to ask for some feedback. And I was like, hey man, I said hey, am I being a jerk here about this? Fully expecting him to be like, no, you're good, keep going. But he paused, which is never a good thing after you ask the question, am I being a jerk here? And he paused for about a second. And then he said to me, yeah, I think you are. I think you're being a little bit of a jerk here. Which took me back. It's not what I wanted to hear, but I'll tell you, I needed to hear those words. You see, you and I, we all need people in our lives who aren't just going to affirm us, who aren't just going to say, way to go, keep going, whatever you think is fine. We all need people who are going to speak the truth to us. Ephesians 4:15 says this. It says, speak the truth in love. Now, I want to take a few seconds and talk about these last two words, in love, because sometimes, especially in churches, sometimes what can happen is people get a little crazy about speaking the truth. Sometimes people can go around and they can just drop truth bombs on people and they just make a mess of relationships. And they all do it under the guise of hey, I'm just telling it as it is. Or, I'm just blunt, you got to get over it. That is not what this verse is saying. It's not saying that. You see, what Nathan does with David, this is where Nathan is just brilliant. First, Nathan had a pre-existing relationship, meaning he's put the time into the friendship with David. He's earned the right to speak the truth. And so he approaches him in a way with love that is going to help David hold up a mirror to his face, see what he's done, and turn from it. You see, you and I, we can be this kind of friend for people we've invested the time in. Now, I know this can feel so risky, but it's so important in great friendships. In fact, I don't know of a great friendship where people can't speak the truth to each other. And so right now I want to give you a couple questions. If you've got someone in mind and you're like, man, I have a friend who they're just going down a bad path. And I've just been silent for way too long. And you're wondering hey, should I speak the truth to them? I want to give you just a couple of questions that you can ask yourself today to know, am I ready to go speak the truth to this person in love? First one is simply this, is have I invested quality time into this relationship? Just have you put the time in? Do you know them? Do you really know them? Where they trust you and are open to you? Have you put the kind of time in where your friendship has gotten deeper? Another question you should ask yourself before you go and speak the truth to someone is simply, have I been transparent and open to their feedback? Have I demonstrated a transparency with them and just an openness? So if you're driving them somewhere and they criticize your driving and they're like, hey, you didn't look behind you, you didn't use your turn signal, and you snap at them, you're like, what's wrong with you? I'm driving the car, leave me alone. You had that kind of conversation, you probably haven't demonstrated transparency and just an openness. So second thing all of us got to do is we got to ask ourselves, hey, have I received their feedback? Or have I shared things going on in my life with them? Last one is this. Can I do this? Can I have this conversation with humility? Understanding that I may not know the whole story. The reality is, you and I, we don't have all the answers. And so can I approach this friend knowing there may be a whole nother piece of this story I don't know? Are you open to that? Well, I'll tell you, if you can say yes to all three of these, you are probably in a position to go speak the truth in love to someone in your life. You may be able to help them and save them from one of the greatest mistakes they're ever going to make. But we got to take that risk. We got to choose to speak the truth. And I'll tell you, your friendship will grow when you do. So here are the three. Here are the three again. We can choose this week to invest time. We can choose over this next season to be transparent. And finally, we can choose to speak the truth in love to the people we care about. Now, here's my hope. Here's what I've been praying for this week. My hope is, as I've been sharing this, that at least one of these three that you see right here, at least one of these three, there was a moment over the last few minutes where you felt a little tug on your heart. I was talking about investing time, and you thought about it, and you're like, oof, I've just been so busy, I just haven't done this. Or I got a friend, and I haven't shared what's going on, and I need to. Or I got to take a risk, and I got to speak the truth. But my hope and my thought is that each one of us, we probably have one, if not more than one, where this week, we got to change course. Like, we got to make some decisions and take some action today. And I want you to know you're not alone in this. And so here's what I want to ask us to do here. Is in a second, I'm going to give you a chance to respond. And in a second, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand for the one that you feel most drawn to. I got to change direction with in my life this week. And I'm doing this because I want you to know you're not the only one. And so this is not like a rhetorical question. This is like, I'm going to ask you, when I read these, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand for the one that you're committing to this week. I'm going to make some change with. So we're going to start with the first one right now. So if you're sitting here today and you're like, you know what? I need to invest more time in my friendships. Like, it just hasn't been a priority. Just all of you outside, all of you in this room, what I want to ask is just right now, right where you're sitting, to just raise your hand. Say, yep, I'm one of those. Yeah, see, bunch of us, we're in this together. Thank you. Some of you in this room, sitting there and you're like, I have some really close friends, but there's something I've just been holding back with them. And there is a burden I'm carrying, and I'm tired. I'm tired of carrying it alone. And so this week, where God's leading you, what God's encouraging you to do is to just increase your transparency. If that's you, I just want to ask right here, where you're sitting inside and out, raise your hand right here. All of us in this room. Yeah, see, a bunch of us in this room with this. And then last one, and this one probably feels the riskiest. If you got someone in your life and you're like, man, I love them too much to let them keep going down the path they're at. I got to speak the truth. If that's you, I want to ask you just right now, right where you're sitting, raise your hand. Yeah, you can raise your hands. Yeah, outside as well. Yeah, we are not alone in this. You see, this issue, relationships, friendship, it is too important to just kind of go along how things are going along. And I think today God is going to lead us this week, maybe even today, into investing in these relationships. Oh, one more thing before we close is I want to speak to all of you guys who are new to church and some of you who are brand new to faith. And it's your first time showing up to church in a long time, maybe ever. Here's what I want you to know today. If you're brand new to faith, what you need to know is our model for friendship, our model where this comes from, is from Jesus. You got to understand that Jesus came to this earth to spend time with you. Like, Jesus invests the time into you. Jesus cares that much about you. And when you get around faith and the faith community and you get around Jesus, one of the things you're going to realize is Jesus is the most authentic and transparent person that has ever walked the face of this earth. And then last, and maybe most importantly, Jesus is willing to speak the truth to you in love. You see, here's the core message of Christianity. Here's the core message Jesus came to this earth to proclaim, is that you and I, we have all messed up. We've all made mistakes. We are all flawed and imperfect. But there is a God who loves you with an insane amount of love. And so Jesus came to this earth to offer you hope and forgiveness. And he promises to never leave you. You see, some of you in this room and outside today, some of you, the most important decision you can make today is to say yes to that offer of forgiveness and hope Jesus offers. And so in a second, when I pray, I'm going to give you one more chance to respond. And if you're sitting here today and you're like, I've never said yes to Jesus before. Like, I've never accepted that gift of forgiveness. Man, in a second you can. And you can experience the love and grace he offers. And if you're ready to do that in just a moment, you can. And after the service, I would love to meet you out at Guest Connect. And I'd love to celebrate the most important decision you can make. Friends, this is why we gather. This is why we gather. Because God is leading each one of us to take a next step. So here's what I'd love to ask, just to close our time. I'd love to ask for all of us here, just close our eyes, bow our heads, and I'm going to lead us in a time of prayer. And so, God, we come before you today, and God, we thank you. God, we thank you that we can have some fun and talk about fun movies. And God, I thank you that you have designed each and every one of us to just connect with others. And so, God, here's what we're praying today. God, for anyone in this room and outside of this room
who's ready to say yes to the forgiveness and love that you offer. God, I pray that you'd give them the courage to respond. So here's what I want to ask, with no one else looking around but me, with everyone's eyes closed and head down, if you're ready to say yes to the forgiveness Jesus offers, I'm just going to ask you right where you're sitting to just raise a hand. It doesn't have to be all the way up, just raise it a little bit. It's just a declaration. You could do it right now between you and God, saying, yes, I'm ready to receive the forgiveness he offers. Yeah, God sees every one of those hands. Put your hands down. And God, we come before you and we celebrate that you are a God who invests time, that you care about us, that you actually want to be with us, and that you modeled what a transparent, authentic life looks like, and that you are willing to speak the truth into our lives with love and guide us and direct us. And so, God, we are so thankful. And God, I pray for every single one of us in this room that today we would have the courage to take that next step and change the direction of some of the friendships in our lives. God, we love you and we are so grateful that you hear our prayers. And we pray this in your son's name. Amen. Amen. Well, hey everyone, thanks so much for being here. Have a great week and we'll see you back next weekend.